Story number 1, Shift Handover. I arrived at the psychiatric ward annex in rural Montana at 11:30 in the evening to relieve the outgoing shift supervisor, a woman named Carol Hendricks who had worked there for 16 years. The building sat 3 miles outside of town on what used to be farmland, a single-story structure with reinforced windows and a secure wing that housed patients requiring extended observation. Carol met me at the staff entrance with her coat already on and her bag over her shoulder. She looked tired in the way people do when they have been doing the same job for too long. She briefed me on the 11 patients currently housed in the secure wing, noting that patient 7 had been moved to observation room C after refusing medication during the evening rounds. The others were stable, she said. 2 were asleep already. The rest were watching television in their rooms or reading. She handed me the keys and the logbook and told me the coffee maker in the break room was broken again. Then she left. I spent the first 40 minutes reviewing the charts and checking the medication logs. Everything was in order. The building was quiet except for the hum of the ventilation system and the occasional sound of someone shifting in their bed. At 12:14 in the morning, I conducted my first hourly check and found all patients asleep or resting quietly, except patient 7, who was sitting upright in the observation room, facing the corner where the walls met the ceiling. She was completely still. I noted it in the log and moved on. When I returned at 1:17 for the second check, patient 7 was in the same position, and I noticed that 3 other patients in separate rooms were now also sitting upright, facing their respective corners in identical posture. Their hands were flat on their knees, their spines were straight. I stood in the hallway for several minutes watching through the observation windows, but none of them moved. I wrote it down in the log and made a note to call the on-call psychiatrist if the behavior continued. I attempted to follow containment protocol by documenting the behavior and contacting the on-call psychiatrist, but received no answer on any of the 3 emergency lines listed in the procedure manual. I tried twice more over the next 15 minutes. The phone rang each time until it went to voicemail. I left messages. I checked the protocol binder to see if there was an alternative contact, but the page with backup numbers had been removed. The torn edge was still visible in the binding. By 2:23, all 11 patients were awake and sitting in the same position, and I observed that they were breathing in perfect unison despite being in separate locked rooms with no visual contact between them. I could see their shoulders rise and fall at exactly the same moment. I counted the interval, 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out, all of them. I stood in the center of the hallway and turned slowly, looking through each window, and every single person was facing a corner with their mouth slightly open and their eyes unblinking. I made the decision to enter observation room C without backup authorization. I used my key and opened the door slowly. Patient 7 did not react. I said her name. I asked if she could hear me. I stepped closer and repeated the question. When I approached patient 7, she turned to face me and opened her mouth, but the voice that came out was speaking in overlapping layers, as if multiple people were using her throat simultaneously. The words were not in English. They were not in any language I recognized. The sound had a texture to it that made my teeth ache. I stepped back and she turned away again, resuming her position facing the corner. I left the room and locked the door. My hands were shaking. I checked the other rooms through the windows and saw that none of the other patients had moved. They were still breathing together. I went to the staff office and pulled the emergency protocol binder again. I found the section on mass incident scenarios. I read it 3 times to make sure I understood what it would mean. I activated the facility-wide sedation protocol, which is reserved for mass incident scenarios and requires a formal review board hearing, knowing it would likely end my employment. The system was designed to release aerosolized sedative through the ventilation network in all patient rooms simultaneously. I entered the authorization code. I confirmed the action. A warning screen appeared asking if I was certain. I selected yes. The system activated with a low mechanical hum that I could feel through the floor. It took 11 minutes for the sedative to take effect. I watched through the windows as, one by one, the patients slumped forward or fell sideways onto their beds. Patient 7 was the last. She remained upright for a full 3 minutes after the others had collapsed. Then she lowered herself carefully onto her side, still facing the corner, and closed her eyes. After the patients were sedated and secured, I completed my incident report at 4:41 in the morning. I wrote everything exactly as it had happened. I included the times and the observations and the lack of response from the on-call psychiatrist. I noted the decision to activate the sedation protocol and the reasons for that decision. I signed the report and placed it in the supervisor's inbox. Then I sat in the staff office and waited. The day supervisor arrived at 6:15 to inform me that I was being placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. Her name was someone I had never met before. She did not introduce herself. She asked for my keys and my identification badge. She told me not to speak to anyone about what had happened and that I would be contacted within 72 hours. I gave her the keys and the badge and left. 3 days later, I received a certified letter reassigning me to a records management position in Billings, with instructions never to discuss the events of that night and confirmation that all security footage from the annex had been corrupted due to equipment malfunction. The letter was signed by someone in the regional administrative office. There was no mention of a review board. There was no request for additional testimony. My new position started the following Monday. I have worked in records management for 8 months now. I organize files and process requests and maintain the archive database. The incident was logged under equipment failure and staff protocol deviation. It was closed and sealed. No further action was recommended. Story number 2. Route inspection. I arrived at the rest stop at 11:30 in the evening to conduct the final walkthrough before the scheduled demolition. The assignment was standard procedure for abandoned state facilities: verify utility disconnection, document structural hazards, confirm the site was clear for contractor access. I had done this work for 12 years. The forms were always the same. The building had been closed since 2006. 18 years of Kansas weather should have gutted the interior, but when I unlocked the main entrance, I found the lobby intact. No graffiti on the walls, no broken fixtures. The vending machines still stood in their alcoves, empty but upright. The floor tiles were dusty but uncracked. I made a note on my clipboard and moved to the utility room. The breaker panel showed everything off, as reported. Water main valve closed. Gas line capped. I photographed each connection point and checked them against the disconnect work order from the previous week. Everything matched. I returned to the main hall and began the room-by-room inspection. That was when I noticed the clocks. There were 4 of them. One above the information desk, one in the vending area, one at the entrance to the restrooms, one in the small seating area near the rear exit. All had stopped. None showed the same time. The clock above the information desk read 3:17. The one near the vending machines read 6:42. The restroom entrance clock showed 8:09. The seating area clock read 10:53. All of them showed PM hours. I checked my notes. The facility had closed during a morning shift in April of 2006. Staff had locked the doors at 9:15 a.m. and transferred to other locations. There was no record of an evening closure. I wrote down the times and continued. The restroom wing was at the east end of the building. I pushed open the door and tested the light switch out of habit. Nothing. I used my flashlight. The beam swept across sinks, mirrors, tile walls. Standard rest stop layout. I moved toward the stall area. On top of the first toilet tank, someone had placed a small plastic toy, a dinosaur. Green with articulated legs. It looked old, the kind of thing sold in the 1980s. I did not touch it. I photographed it and moved to the next stall. A pair of eyeglasses, wireframes, bifocal lenses. They sat in the center of the tank, lenses clean. The third stool held a wallet. Brown leather, worn at the edges. I opened it with a pen. No cash, no cards. A driver's license from 1994, expired, photo faded. The fourth stall contained a cell phone. Flip style, silver casing, the kind common in the early 2000s. The fifth held a digital camera. The sixth held a smartphone, older model, cracked screen. Each item was centered on its respective tank. Each appeared older than the one before as I moved from the entrance toward the back wall. None of this was in any lost property report I had reviewed. I checked my radio and called my supervisor. Static. I tried again. Nothing. I moved back toward the main hall and tried a third time. The radio worked. My supervisor answered. I told him I was finding unlogged property and would need to document it before proceeding. He told me to bag and tag anything unusual and complete the walkthrough. Standard instruction. I returned to the restroom wing. I spent the next 20 minutes photographing each item and its position. I did not move them. I filled out a property recovery form and sealed the restroom area with caution tape. Then I proceeded to the office. The office was behind the information desk, accessible through a locked door. I had the master key. The room was small, one desk, one filing cabinet, one corkboard on the wall. I checked the desk first. The surface was clear except for a maintenance log, the kind we used for daily inspections. It was open to a page dated September of 2007. The facility had closed in April of 2006. I turned the pages. Each one was filled out in blue ink. Dates, times, initials. Tasks completed, restroom check, floor sweep, trash removal, exterior walk. The handwriting was consistent. The entries continued through 2007 into 2008. The last entry was dated November 14, 2007 at 6:15 p.m. I checked the signature line. The initials were RM. I knew those initials, Robert Milner. He had retired in 2005. I photographed every page. Then I opened the filing cabinet. Inside were more logs. Going back to the facility's opening in 1973, I pulled the most recent ones. They matched the desk log. Routine entries, normal tasks, no indication of closure. The handwriting changed across different years, but I recognized several sets of initials from staff I had worked with. All of them had left the department years before 2007. I sealed the office and returned to the main hall. I checked my watch. It was 3:45 a.m. I looked at my clipboard. According to my checklist, I had completed only the utility verification and the first 2 rooms. 40 minutes of work. I had been inside for 4 hours and 14 minutes. I left the building and locked the entrance. My radio worked again. I called my supervisor and told him I was filing an incident report and recommending the site be held pending further review. He told me to submit everything by end of shift. I wrote the report in my truck. I attached all photographs and documentation. I submitted it at 6:30 a.m. 3 days later, someone from the State Historical Commission arrived at my office. They did not identify themselves beyond showing credentials. They took my report, my photographs, and my notes. They told me the site had been reclassified for environmental study and demolition was postponed indefinitely. They did not ask me any questions. They left with everything. The following week, I received reassignment orders. Different district, same role, no explanation. I did not ask for one. I drove past the rest stop once 2 months later on my way to a conference in Salina. The building was still standing. New chain-link fencing surrounded the property. A sign near the entrance read, "State Facilities Management, authorized personnel only." There were no other markings. The demolition file was removed from the district archive. My report is not in the system. The site remains listed as equipment storage. Story number 3. Evidence Room. I arrived at the Clatsop County Courthouse Annex on the morning of November 14, 2023, to conduct the annual evidence inventory audit for items predating digital cataloging. The assignment was routine. I had performed similar audits in 3 other counties that fiscal year without incident. The basement facility contained approximately 3,000 items stored in a climate-controlled vault, accessed through a steel door with a combination lock, unchanged since 1978. The county clerk provided me with the combination on a handwritten card and informed me that I would be working alone, as the part-time evidence custodian was on medical leave. I began the audit at 9:32 in the morning, working from the oldest items forward according to case number. The vault was well maintained, with stable temperature and humidity readings displayed on a wall-mounted monitor. Each box was labeled with a case reference, date of storage, and brief contents description, written in faded ink or typed on deteriorating labels. At 10:15 in the morning, I noted that evidence box CR-1967-0041, logged as containing clothing from a resolved missing persons case, was producing condensation on its exterior despite the controlled humidity. I recorded the observation in my notes and checked the monitor. The readings showed 68 degrees Fahrenheit and 42% humidity, both within acceptable parameters. Upon opening the box, I found the clothing items were damp and cold to the touch, with a temperature reading of 34 degrees Fahrenheit, while the room maintained 68 degrees. The items consisted of a wool coat, denim trousers, and a cotton shirt, all appearing significantly older than the 1967 date on the label. The fabric was intact, but felt wrong in a way I could not articulate in my initial notes. I proceeded with standard documentation protocol until I discovered that the condensation was spreading to adjacent boxes in a radial pattern, affecting items with no connection to the original case. Box CR-1968-0013 contained a hunting rifle. Box CR-1966-0089 contained financial documents in plastic sleeves. Both were now wet to the touch, and the temperature differential was measurable with my infrared thermometer. I moved away from the affected area to document the spread pattern and noticed that the condensation was not behaving as water typically does. It was not dripping or pooling. It remained on the surfaces of the boxes, spreading outward in a thin, even film that stopped precisely at the edges of each container before jumping to the next. At 11:43, the vault door sealed itself during my inspection, and the combination mechanism would not respond to the correct sequence. I heard the bolt mechanism engage with a metallic sound that seemed louder than it should have been in the enclosed space. I attempted the combination 4 times, carefully following the sequence provided by the county clerk. The dial turned smoothly, but the door would not open. The temperature in the sealed vault dropped 11 degrees over the next 22 minutes, and I observed my breath forming vapor despite the HVAC system showing normal operation on the interior panel. The monitor continued to display 68 degrees. I checked my thermometer against 3 separate locations in the vault and recorded consistent readings of 57 degrees. The condensation had spread to approximately 140 boxes by this point. I could hear a faint sound that I initially attributed to the ventilation system, but it did not correspond with the fan cycle. It was rhythmic and low, almost below the threshold of hearing. I used the emergency landline mounted near the interior control panel to contact the county facilities supervisor. I provided my name, location, and a brief description of the situation, stating that I was sealed in the vault and that environmental conditions were deviating from normal parameters. I did not mention the condensation pattern or the sound. The supervisor said he would send maintenance personnel immediately. I continued documenting the affected boxes while I waited. The condensation had stopped spreading at box CR-1972-00333. The boundary was precise. I touched the surface of the last affected box and then the surface of the adjacent unaffected box. The temperature difference was 19 degrees. The sound grew slightly louder. I stood near the door and waited. At 12:37, the county facilities supervisor arrived with 2 maintenance personnel. I heard voices outside the vault, then the sound of the combination being entered. The door opened without resistance. The supervisor asked if I was all right. I confirmed that I was and stepped out of the vault. The temperature inside the vault, according to their handheld meter, was 68 degrees. The monitor showed the same. I asked them to check the boxes I had flagged in my notes. The supervisor entered the vault with one of the maintenance workers and examined the boxes. He reported that they were dry and at room temperature. I returned to the vault with them and confirmed their findings. The condensation was gone. The boxes I had documented as affected showed no signs of moisture. I placed my hand on box CR-1967-0041. It was 68 degrees. The supervisor asked if I wanted to continue the audit or reschedule. I told him I would continue. He instructed the maintenance personnel to prop the vault door open for the remainder of my work. I completed the inventory audit over the next 3 hours without further incident. In my report, I flagged 17 boxes for temperature anomalies and recommended immediate transfer to the state facility in Salem. I included my thermometer readings, timestamps, and observations regarding the vault door malfunction. I did not include descriptions of the condensation spread pattern or the sound. I noted that environmental monitoring equipment should be recalibrated and that the door mechanism should be inspected. The basement vault was decommissioned 6 weeks later under a routine infrastructure assessment, and all evidence was relocated without incident or explanation provided to my office. My report was filed in the county records system and marked as complete. I was not contacted for follow-up questions. The audit cycle continued the following year at a different facility.